Jabreen Castle is by far one of the most beautiful pieces of architecture on the Arabian Peninsula. Certainly, it is the most awe-inspiring castle located in the heart of the modern-day country of Oman. It simply dominates the skyline of the small town and desert that surround it. The fort was finished in 1675, and its construction was funded by Bil'arab Yaruba, the son of the ruler of Oman, Imam Sultan. Imam Sultan, as Yoruban traditions seem to permit, had made a career and fortune from fighting the Portuguese Empire. He even ventured as far as raiding Portuguese colonies in India and briefly conquered a Portuguese settlement in East Africa named Mombasa. Oman prospered under Imam Sultan's rule. With this extra revenue, the Imam gifted some of his wealth to his firstborn son, Bil'arab, so he could construct Jabreen Fortress. Jabreen Fortress was strategically positioned between the Omani capital of Nizwa and the fort of Rustak, where both Imam Sultan and his cousin, the first Yoruban ruler, Imam Nasir bin Murshid, were elected as Imam. When Jabreen Castle was finished in 1675, Imam Sultan was already nearing the end of his long 30-year reign. Only 4 years after the completion of Jabreen Castle, in 1679, Imam Sultan would die. The succession of his eldest son wasn't a guarantee. As stated before, both previous Yoruba Imams were elected by a council that convened at Rustak Fortress. There was no established hereditary succession either, as the first Yoruba Imam, Nasir bin Murshid, was merely a cousin of Imam Sultan. Despite this, upon the death of his father, Bil'arab Yaruba would confirm the hereditary role of Imam. This was not against the laws of the nation, but it certainly was against the tradition of the state religion, Ibadi Islam. An important tenet of Ibadism required for the election of any state or spiritual leader, a notion that Imam Bil'arab decided to ignore in order to become more similar to the rest of the world's hereditary absolute monarchies. An action that he would one day come to regret. He formally transferred his royal residence to the newly constructed masterpiece fort of Jabreen, that, at a closer inspection, seemed to be more of a palace than a castle. Jabreen Castle is made up of a series of many right angles, ovals, and arches that somehow blend together and create an overlapping, yet opposite symmetry, with the best example of this style displayed by this staircase that leads to one of the 3 watchtowers. Entering the main palace complex, you will be delighted to find a grand reception room that is named the Sun and Moon Hall, that can observe both the sun rise and set. The Sun and Moon Hall was built in this fashion so Imam Bil'arab could observe one of his favorite hobbies, astrology. This passion for observing the stars may explain the unique mural located on the wooden ceiling of the Grand Hall. Eyeballs, disguised as bundles of flowers and other flora, were painted all over the ceiling, ensuring that the room that so many looked out of was also always being watched over. Along with astrology, Imam Bil'arab seemed to have been both a scholar of the arts and sciences himself and a promoter of fellow scholars, who frequently took up residence in Jabreen Castle to study alongside the Imam. Alongside the Sun and Moon Observation Hall, there was also a large library with a classroom connected alongside it. Exiting the Sun and Moon Hall, you will come to find a central square courtyard that draws inspiration from classical Greek architecture. Looking up, there is only the sky to greet you, as an opening cuts through the 2 levels above. The mentioned 2 levels feature intricate stone-carved windows that almost appear as if they are weaved, alongside arches and square windows that are carved in an outlining fashion. Imam Bil'arab spent the majority of his 13-year reign behind the walls of his castle palace. After more than 60 years of war against Oman's former colonial oppressor, Portugal, Imam Bil'arab's reign was very peaceful in comparison to his predecessors. With no raids on overseas Portuguese colonies being conducted, the Omani warships did still continue in their capturing of any Portuguese vessels that they happened to come across in their corner of the Indian Ocean. Many were happy for peace in Oman, but some still urged for continuous war against the Portuguese menace. The younger brother of the Imam, a man named Saif, was a leading member of the anti-Portuguese cause. During the final 3 years of Imam Bil'arab's reign, Saif had started a rebellion against his scholarly brother, a justified war, as Imam Bil'arab was not voted into his role as his predecessors had, meaning his overthrow was fair game for any member of the Yarubid family. The two men could not be more opposite. Like their father before them, Saif was a warrior, through and through. Not being able to fight the Portuguese was something that Saif and many Omanis simply could not accept. Having the warrior class on his side, Saif led a successful rebellion that eventually confided his brother to the fort palace that he cherished so much at Jabreen. The peace-loving Bil'arab had no chance against the military expertise of his younger brother, who held the Imam in a siege for nearly 3 whole years. Many Omanis were indifferent to their Imam, who rarely left the sanctity of Jabreen Fortress. As Imam Bil'arab had spent his reign behind the walls of Jabreen, so too would he die behind them. In 1692, Bil'arab Yaruba would die unexpectedly. Sources remit how the Imam died naturally, but considering his hopeless position, I find it more likely that Bil'arab may have committed suicide by poison. His brother Saif then was handed over Jabreen Fortress without a fight. Soon after, he proclaimed himself as the new and 4th Imam of Oman's Yaruba dynasty. Imam Bil'arab Yaruba was without a doubt a great scholar and a lover of beautiful architecture. He was not even a bad Imam, just a slightly decadent one who was perhaps a bit out of touch with his people. This broke the trend of the first two, much more warlike Yoruba Imams. Ultimately, this disregard for the continuation of war with Portugal would be his downfall. The Omani army was not ready for peace. They still sought more revenge against their Portuguese oppressor. Bil'arab, the scholar Imam, may not have led an exciting life or reign, but Bil'arab was the builder of one of the Arabian Peninsula's most magnificent castles.